India is aiming to become the third largest economy in the world soon. But tied up very closely to our growth aspirations is the fact that we are also committed to being socially and environmentally responsible. Now, the World Bank has approved a new development policy loan for India's clean energy transition. And to discuss that further with me, I'm joined by World Bank's India Country Director, Mr. Auguste Kouame. So thank you so much for joining us here on NDTV.
You're welcome very much. Thank you.
So we'll begin by asking you about the second low carbon energy program development policy operation, and how is this taking forward from the first tranche of 8 that World Bank in fact forwarded to the Indian government?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is the second operation that the World Bank provides to the government of India in support of the National Green Hydrogen Mission that the government of India issued in January 2023. It's a very ambitious program for stimulating 100 billion worth of private investment in green hydrogen production and in electrolyzer production. So this is one of the most ambitious green hydrogen programs around the world, and that will make India one of the front runners in green hydrogen, as well as one of the biggest producers. And we were very excited about that program. We contributed to perhaps coming up with it through our technical assistance that have been going on for years. We support the energy transition of the government of India through some technical assistance. And when the green hydrogen mission was announced, our first step in helping implement it was to come up with a 1.5 billion development policy loan, which our board approved in June last year. First, to help the government incentive system for private sector to invest in the production of electrolyzers for green hydrogen and the actual production of green hydrogen. And second, to help encourage the private sector to continue investing in renewable energy, in solar in particular, and wind, so that those can feed into the production of green hydrogen. And third, to help also continue the effort that the government has been making in developing the financing of energy transition through carbon market, for example, or through green bonds. And the second operation is coming now to continue this effort, to make it a bit more concrete. For example, that the government has identified that fertilizers and refineries are going to be the first users of green hydrogen. So the second operation will support government operation to come up with tenders or purchase agreements from refineries or from fertilizer industry. And those purchase agreements will give incentive to the private sector to actually produce by investing so that they will sell to those end users. And there will be other end users that will come in. The steel industry, for example, will be a big user. Transportation will be a big user. Shipping could be. And then the second operation will also continue the effort to encourage the production of renewable energy by connecting renewable energy produced in distant sites to the grid, so that they can put their production into the grid, and that will then feed into the production of green hydrogen. And of course, we'll continue the effort of stimulating investment in green energy in general and green hydrogen in particular.
Is this also the second part of the operation? Is it focused more on capacity building as well, or like paving the way for more capacity building?
The package actually has a capacity building component. As I said earlier, even before the National Green Hydrogen Mission was announced, we were providing capacity building or technical assistance or knowledge sharing. Green hydrogen is a very new sector for the world, but a few countries have taken some steps already to produce green hydrogen and to use green hydrogen. So in the initial steps, we connected India with those countries that that were front runners, if you will. And this was knowledge sharing, technical assistance, and that helped us, it certainly helped position the World Bank as a knowledge partner of the government of India in the National Green Hydrogen Mission design and implementation. And you're right, up to today, there is still need for technical assistance. So yes, we're providing technical assistance in areas such as safety, because producing green hydrogen is new. Therefore, there are some aspects that you want to think about to make sure that the people involved in the production process are safe. So we're looking at safety of production of green hydrogen. We're looking at safety of transportation of green hydrogen. We're looking at capacity building for ensuring that the environmental and social standards are well taken care of. We're also thinking of how you want to produce green hydrogen without putting too much pressure on the national water resources, because green hydrogen consumes quite a bit of water in the production process. So we're looking at technical assistance and providing technical advice in those areas to ensure that you have a new and exciting industry of green hydrogen emerging without creating some unpleasant surprises on safety and water resource use, for example.
Right. In terms of the progress that India has made so far, because the first tranche of aid went last year from World Bank. So from there to now, in terms of the progress that India has made, and obviously the second tranche has also been approved after seeing the the forward movement in India's green hydrogen mission as well. Are you satisfied, or are you happy with the pace that India has kept so far?
Absolutely, absolutely. India's ambition under the National Green Hydrogen Mission is to achieve 500 million metric tons of green hydrogen production by 2030. Already, under our first operation, and perhaps even beyond it, because we are not the only game changer. The government of India is actually the biggest game changer in all this. We're only here to support the effort. But since the approval of our first operations, we've looked at some numbers, and we already see that there is enough commitment from the private sector to achieve 300 million metric tons of production of green hydrogen by 2026. Or at least that's our goal under the first operation. And there is interest, sufficient interest to achieve that goal, because of the 100 billion private investment that the government wants to achieve by 2030. There is enough interest from the private sector to already invest 70 billion by already, right? So in the coming months and years, there may be more expression of interest from the private sector. So the goal of 100 billion is probably likely to be exceeded. And secondly, we hope to achieve 3 gigawatt of electrolyzer production by 2026, which will go a long way in achieving the 2030 goal of the government of India. So yeah, a lot of progress, and then some satisfaction in the fact that the government has already issued tenders for production of green hydrogen and electrolyzers, and they've been very good responses to those tenders issues. And as I said, in total, we have 70 billion expression of interest already to produce green hydrogen and electrolyzer, which is quite satisfactory.
In terms of the private sector, because you're talking about the private sector already, do you think that it's still limited among a few players, or what else can be done in order to encourage more private sector investment into this mission? From the World Bank side, what message would you want to send out to them?
Well, the message I would like to send is, we don't know of any limitation that the government of India has imposed on who should participate in the green hydrogen movement, if you will. It's open to all private sector. And our sense is that there is sufficient measures put out there to interest the private sector. The government program will help with viability gap funding. So, if a private sector thinks that it's perhaps a bit too risky to invest in green hydrogen now, well, it's not risky, because there is a viability gap funding that you will get from the government. And if the private sector says, oh, well, I'm not sure I'll be able to sell my output, well, you will, because there is, under the program, including through the World Bank support, the government is taking a number of actions to stimulate demand, as I said, from fertilizers, from refineries, and there will be more demand coming up. Well, if you're not sure you'll be able to export, if you're a big exporter, you might, because the government is already, there are already contacts between the government and some countries that are interested in importing India's green hydrogen. So I think this is a sector where if you can master the technology, because there is a technological part of it, it's not a simple investment, but if you can master the technology and find the right partnership, it is going to be an area where there will be a lot of opportunities. I think perhaps size matters here, because if you're a very small private sector, it's not very easy to find what you need to invest, but you can enter into partnership with other private sector investors. And in the World Bank, we have the IFC, which is our private sector arm. And we know that many private sector investors are talking to the IFC to express their interest in loans from IFC to invest in green hydrogen. So I would encourage the private sector to seize on this opportunity, because it is the future. India's economy is growing very fast. India will need more energy to power the economy, and that energy will have to be green, because if it is not green, it means that more CO2 will be emitted. And there are sectors that are very dependent on green hydrogen to decarbonize.
Right.
And those sectors are very big in the economy, but they're also very important for export. So there is going to be a big demand for green energy in general, and green hydrogen in particular, because of the need to decarbonize hard to abate sectors. And the demand is going to grow.
Right. So Mr. Kouame, according to you, what should be the 3 focus areas for India to reach the goals that they have set for themselves by the time they reach 2030?
So, well, first is to ensure that the regulations are put in place quickly, because the incentive mechanism is out there. The private sector can use the incentive mechanism. We're working with the government of India on a number of regulations, as I said, for safety, for example. So those regulations, and there will be more regulations to come up with, because this is a new area, and maybe every 6 months, every year, we'll find out, okay, we need a bit more regulations here and there. We need some regulations to connect the green hydrogen site to the site where they will be used. Maybe we need some regulation between the port or the shipping industry, for example, because some of the export will be done through shipping. So we want to. I will submit that there is a need to stay up to date with the regulation and act quickly to put them in place, so that the private sector feels confident that it is an area that is benefiting from the best possible regulations. And workers in the sector also will need to be comfortable that they were protected, that the safety standard, and so on and so forth. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is to work with the banking sector, the financing system. In our operation, there is a third pillar. First is green hydrogen, then we have renewable energy, but there is also the financing pillar. Right. And there is a need to ensure that the financing is coming up. So right now there are intentions to invest up to 70 billion, but maybe not all these 70 billions have been sourced from the banking system or the financial system. So keeping an eye on ensuring that the private sector investors are getting the financing that they need, without necessarily having to give them the money, because the government doesn't have to provide the financing directly except through incentives. But ensuring that the financial system is responding, perhaps through carbon market. Maybe some investors will rely on carbon market. Maybe some will use nature-based solution. Maybe some of them will use direct financing. Maybe some of them will look for partnerships. So this will also be important. And the third thing is, on the use side, electrons are electrons. When we're using electricity, we don't know where it is coming from, right? But it's important that increasingly there are actions taken to ensure that when you switch your light on, you're getting green energy in it. And that's, the consumers cannot do it, because we don't think beyond just getting light in the house, but the government will know where the light is coming from, and working on the continuum of electricity generation, power generation, to ensure continued increase of the share of renewable and green hydrogen into the power grid, will expand the market for green hydrogen, and will make investment in green hydrogen even more rewarding, and encourage even more investment into green hydrogen. Otherwise, there might be competition between traditional fossil fuel and green hydrogen, and if it's left to competition, maybe the fossil fuel will win because it may be cheaper to produce than green hydrogen. So government intervention may be needed there.
Right. Would you want to hazard a guess as to when we can see a time when green hydrogen would become more affordable also for the Indian consumer, because if you look at the trajectory that solar energy has had in the country, it has been adopted, but it took a bit of time. And also transitioning to renewables is also capital intensive. So would you want to hazard a guess, because the Indian consumer is price sensitive?
Yeah, so good thing is that the Indian consumer will probably not buy green hydrogen by itself.
Right.
It will be part of the mix.
Right.
And as I said, when you buy electricity, you don't know which. So, yes, there will be a time when green hydrogen will be cheaper than traditional energy, and our estimate is that it depends on countries. I don't want to hazard a year, but my hunch is that in India it can happen by the time the government National Green Hydrogen Mission is fully implemented. You will see, the green hydrogen will become more cost effective than traditional energy. We're already seeing that the production of green hydrogen is already cheaper than the production of fossil fuel. What makes green hydrogen a bit more expensive than fossil fuel is the transportation cost associated with it and the storage associated with it. But the actual production, if you just take the cost of electrolyzers and the production itself, it's cheaper to produce a unit of green hydrogen than to produce a unit of fossil fuel energy. But fossil fuel energy has the advantage of easier to be conserved, easier perhaps to be shipped and to be transmitted, to be transported. So if we work on those other ancillary aspects of green hydrogen, storage, transport, and maybe safety aspect, it will quickly become cheaper to produce and to use and to consume.
In terms of best practices, if we look at any other country, where do you think that India can learn from in terms of adopt, page or a chapter from someone else's book? Where do you think that the Indian government can help to look at a certain current country's direction?
So there are a few countries in Europe that have, and the US also, that have made progress in green hydrogen production and storage and conservation. Germany is one country that has been talked about. We've organized study tours in a few countries in Europe as well. I think countries such as the Netherlands should be countries to look at as well. But importantly, it's important to remember that green hydrogen, whilst it's a global technology, electrolyzer is a global technology. It's the same almost everywhere. But there is a strong local component in it, because how you produce green hydrogen, how you actually get it efficiently depends on your water, the type of water you use for electrolyzer. How you produce and transport it cheaply depends on where you produce it and where you use it. So in the World Bank, recognizing that there is a strong local country-specific component to green hydrogen technology, we have issued what we call Hydrogen for Development program, which we announced at COP27. And there are a number of countries who have already signed up for it. And so there is knowledge sharing happening between those countries, Brazil, Morocco, Egypt, Turkey, and others they've signed up, and they're in Chile. Chile and India actually are the first two countries in the global south really moving fast on green hydrogen, at least as they relate to the partnership with the World Bank. So we have a program in Chile that was approved recently, and we have the program in India that was approved June last year. We have a number of new projects coming up for a few other countries. And for some other countries, such as Turkey, we're providing technical assistance and knowledge capacity building. So those countries, they can learn among themselves. They can also learn from countries in Europe. So I would say, yes, be open to learning from other countries, be open to sharing India's experience with other countries, but recognizing that the country-specific factors are important is also very critical.
I want to stay connected to the topic that we are looking at, and this is, of course, very, very, it is interconnected in the sense that if we look at this year itself, not just in India but across the world, the impact of climate change has been so starkly visible. It has become very real for people. And of course, transitioning to renewable energy is connected to that. But in terms of mitigating the impact of climate change, which is also can have a very adverse impact on India's growth, what do you think India's focus should be in terms of actually tackling this situation?
Wow, India's, this is an area where it is hard to say that India should do just one or two things, because it is a big agenda and India is a big country. I would say first, focus on people, because the impact of climate change on people is almost worrying around the world. Not just in India. The disasters or the climate shocks, when they happen, of course they affect the economy, but they really affect people. So first, how to invest and in what to invest to make people safe, knowing that climate impact is here to stay. Well, it's happening already. It may not stay, but it's happening. We can hide from it. So invest first in making places and people safe, in making coastal regions safe, in making other places safe, and improving the quality of the air quality, for example, and doing things that improves people's health and safety. That's the first thing. Second is making systems safe. So as we build new things, as we retrofit our power grid, for example, or as we retrofit roads, or as we develop cities, ensuring that they're resilient, that they're not going to be hugely impacted by climate shocks. So factoring in the resilience notion, making them more fit for purpose for the climate risky world in which we live today. Then the third thing to do is to think about the future, how to bend the curve of emission going forward, how to act so that we don't emit more CO2s, even more CO2s and more greenhouse gases in the air. So again, this is what we call the mitigation agenda, mitigate the impact of today's activity on future climate. So for that, you do exactly what we've been talking about. Use more green energy and less fossil fuel energy. India has the ambition of having 50% of its energy coming from renewable energy by 2030. This is totally doable, but it requires a lot of investment now into renewable energies. India wants to reduce the CO2 content of its GDP by 45% from 2005 level, I believe, by 2030. This means using less fossil fuel and more green energy into producing things, into hard-to-abate sectors. So investing in green hydrogen is part of the story. Investing in solar, in floating solar, or in wind energy or in hydro power is good. So that's what I would say focusing on for mitigation is important. And then encouraging global solutions and and coordination. So, for example, when it comes to solar, some countries have more solar exposure sometime in the year, perhaps even at night, than India would have. So if they can pool those resources together and share energy among themselves. Some countries have more hydro power than others because they have more rivers, more natural hydro sources. So, creating a regional energy market to buy hydro from other countries could be a solution so that the GDP produced in India depends less on fossil fuel and uses more renewable, whether produced in India or elsewhere. So but again, this is not new. The government of India knows this and has been doing a lot of things actually on all these dimensions. And our hope is that this effort will continue.
Right. My last question to you, sir, that India is already facing an unemployment challenge, a jobs challenge rather. Within that parameter, what would you advise or what would you counsel to the Indian government on how, while there, there's a focus on providing more jobs, that they factor in sufficient number of green jobs as well, which the government has spoken about earlier. But how would you, what counsel would you give to the government in terms of generating more green jobs as well while we are tackling the unemployment challenge?
Well, the government has identified this challenge very well, and I think is taking a number of steps. First, if I were to give any advice, which the government probably doesn't need, is it's great to recognize the challenge, and that's great, and it's good to continue making effort to address it. But coming back to green jobs, and thanks for asking this question because it's relevant for the green hydrogen operation that we're here to discuss. Under the National Green Hydrogen Mission, the government hopes to create 600,000 jobs just in the green hydrogen industry, which is not insignificant. In just one industry, 600,000 jobs is a lot. And I suspect these are direct jobs, and there could be several more indirect jobs related to it. And this is good to have these jobs created because there may be some job lost in the traditional fossil fuel, because some of these fossil fuel sites may close or may not produce as much as before because industry and consumers will want to use more green energy. So if net there is more new job created than job disappearing, that would be great. And if the jobs that are created in the green sector are more inclusive than the jobs that are disappearing in the fossil fuel, it's even better because in the fossil fuel, jobs are, they're not as inclusive. There are not as many women working in hydrocarbon industry as you would want to see. Whilst in the green hydrogen, the jobs are more inclusive. They require more talent, education. Some of the jobs can be done even from home. The hours of work are perhaps more conducive for women, and the nature of the work itself may be conducive to have more women. So I think there will be a lot of pluses. First, more jobs. Second, jobs that are more inclusive. I think beyond that, there are some effort also which a government will want to do purposefully to actually really, really encourage job creation. So I think if one were to think of embedding more fully the job aspect into the energy transition, it is not inconceivable to think of something that looks like a PLI, but really with a strong job content. So to say, okay, if you're a private sector investor and you want to get a production-linked incentives from the government, you also want to show how much job you're going to create. If you're going to create more jobs than your competitor, you'll get even more incentives, right? Your competitor will get some because they're going to produce something in India, so it's good. But those that are going to make things in India whilst creating even more jobs will get even more government incentives. So, there are ways of making this job agenda even, punchier I would say.
All right.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of this conversation. Mr. Kouame, thank you so much for your time for NDTV.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Garima. Thank you. Thank you for having me.